Hi, welcome to Hamilton and Hazen, Behind the Mic. Join author M.L. Hamilton and me, I'm narrator Kelley Hazen, as we discuss our latest audiobook. Born from our 7 years of collaboration and more than 60 audiobooks we've produced together, listen to the ins, the outs, the ups, and the downs, the inside track you love to follow, Behind the Mic.
Welcome to Behind the Mic number 17. Hi, Kelley.
Hi.
Can you believe this is 17 we've done of these?
No.
So today we're going to be talking about my nonfiction book called Ramblings. And I'm actually going to turn it over to you and you're going to host today.
I am the host of Behind the Mic. Hello, it's Kelley Hazen, Behind the Mic. We welcome today author M.L. Hamilton. It's this was a fun one. This was really exciting. Ramblings, an author's experiences, volume 1, which
Yes.
is something I want to talk about. You and I have talked about the fact that we have had some interesting experiences because, of course, you write fiction, right? You're known for your fiction, and certainly, and it makes sense that you've released a nonfiction book because you write fiction, but you write in multiple genres.
Yes.
So it makes a lot of sense that you would branch over. And we were just talking right before we hit the record button. You were mentioning that some of our reviews have been very interesting because they're from our fiction fans, right? So why don't let's begin with that. What has been the general hue and cry now that you've released this nonfiction book about your life journey?
Yeah, so just to kind of catch everybody up on what Ramblings is I write these little anecdotes when something happens, and I kept them, and I kept this collection of them, and they would be things that maybe I would send out to friends, or I would post on Facebook, or some I just wrote for myself, and I just kept them. And when I finally felt like I had a good enough collection of them, then I started breaking them into different categories. And so one of them was being a mother and to sons, and one was about the pets, and then one was about living in the growing up in the 80s and things like that. And so the reviewers, all the ones that you sent to me, talked
Mhm.
about how they had listened to my fiction for years, and then this was they were kind of reluctant to even take on this autobiographical book. And when they did, they were surprised because it gave them a new insight into me as a human being. And so I think it's that thing of people that we read, authors or actors, they seem distant somehow. They seem separated from us because we see them through their work. We don't see them as a person. And it's ironic too, because sometimes with my students, they'll say, I never even thought of you as being, a 49ers fan or something like that, because they think of me as I'm somewhat distant from them. I'm not really, I don't think, fully human in some regards. And I think
We see everybody in context, right? I mean, we know the people that we know in a context, and the people that are close to us, we know them in multiple contexts,
right.
right? They're part of our lives. The readers, the listeners know the world that you create. And I also think as a reader and a listener myself, is that we imagine an author in, their ivory tower or their mahogany library or whatever, conjuring up these worlds and these characters and these ideas and these plots. And it kind of goes back. We forget the whole write what you
Yeah.
know, is not necessarily what you do, but certainly in what people write, there's got to be at least a piece of themselves, at least a drop, a little bit of who they are. But they're also so much more, you
Yeah.
know.
And that's what I think came through, and that it kind of gave me this epiphany when I was reading the comments of, yeah, how interesting. I mean, like, one commented on the fact that I'm an animal lover, and
Mm.
I think that would come through in my fiction writing, but maybe it doesn't. And so it was interesting that the takeaways people had, of me as a human being versus me as the writer of, of
That
a
I think it's very brave. I mean, you've chosen to let people into this you've chosen to let people into your life.
yeah,
How you react to things, and when we were talking about this, if you're familiar with the writer Irma Bombeck,
yes.
you are not Irma Bombeck, right? But there's a flavor of that. There's an irony. There's a laugh at yourself. There's a wry humor that I really enjoyed. And to piggyback what you were saying about the listeners just being they almost didn't listen or they were skeptical about listening to it. Don't you think that also has something to do with there's a real divide between people that read fiction and people that read nonfiction. Do you experience that?
I do, but I also wonder if it's more of the I don't know that I want to read her inner thoughts, because what if she's not the person that I thought she was? And then it's kind of the, hate the artist, don't hate the art. You know what I mean? And I wonder if there was some worry there, like if I read her inner thoughts, maybe she's not going to be the person that I thought she was. And then it's going to ruin her fiction for me, and I can kind of
Uh,
understand that. I can kind of understand that feeling that maybe I would reveal something that would be shocking or surprising, that I had, a certain belief system that maybe that they didn't share.
were there things that you considered writing about and then decided not to because you thought they might be too controversial?
I think we always self-edit to some degree, right? I think even when we're speaking to people, we tend to self-edit, we want to present. But I don't think that with those, because when I write those, it's always a moment where I'm feeling very, very strongly about what has happened, and I feel I have to get it out or I'm gonna, explode. So I think with those are probably raw in a way that my fiction writing isn't, because it was always something where, I write a lot. Um, my brain, can get to be like a beehive at night sometimes. And so the way that I can quiet it is to
Mm.
it's kind of like, putting it onto the paper allows me to get rid of it. And so I think in some regards, those are more raw than my fiction writing is.
Mhm. One of them, in thinking about the Irma Bombeck reference, one of the sections of ramblings that immediately I just adored was the beep in the night, which has a real feeling for that. I thought you really captured the absurdity of living during COVID.
So I have to tell you, when I listened to it, when I heard you read it, I had this almost out of body experience listening to it, going, "Oh my God, that was our reality." Like, we lived that. It's meant to be funny and it's meant to be hyperbole, but it kind of isn't, Kelly. And I think back on those years of COVID, and that was how we were living. And everything required so much thought, right? Like, to go to the
Operate.
store required, yeah, preparation. And how did we survive it? I think back on it now, and when I was listening to it, I almost felt like I had a little bit of PTSD, because it was like this is meant to be irony, and yet it's not really ironic, because that was our reality. It was
Bruce and I regularly drive by. There's a particular road that we drive on a lot to get to the places you go regularly in your life, and it happens to go by the Bevmo.
yeah,
And every time we drive by, there's this moment of, I mean, we had our Bevmo account. We had their COVID procedure down. We could pull in back into the space, click the back window. He would go up with his gather, whip it into the back of the car. We'd pull out. I mean, it's and we talk it's like we shake our heads, right? Because, we're in the middle of sober January right now and spent quite a bit of 2023 choosing not to drink and but it wasn't so long ago. I mean, we talk about, oh my God, how many times did we go to Bevmo? Still, we talk about how many times we went to Bevmo during COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that and yes, that was certainly, but it was an event in that time that became a part of how we survived
Yeah,
that period of
I
time.
still have in my garage, I have a shelf that we had put up and we had we stored food like and I'm slowly getting rid of it because it's all expired now, but it was stuff that we had stocked up on, and we kept it in the garage, and I remember thinking a couple times that I had left the garage door open during the COVID times and like, oh my God, somebody might have stolen some of our food. And I remember thinking what a horrible thought that was. What, that I worried about somebody coming in and stealing food that maybe if they needed, they should have had. You know what I mean? But
Uh,
it,
there was one of the other segments of ramblings that there were a couple a plea for public speaking.
yeah,
I thought that was just really so spot on. And I remember the first, I mean, I've never had a problem talking to people in public. That's my strength, that's my talent. But I remembered the teacher who she was my freshman year in high school, Mrs. Marksberry. And she, certainly whatever I am today, she played a part in and was the first person the first teacher that really, not the first teacher, but she was the first teacher. She was the speech class. It was my first speech class. And she was very important to me. And that I thought that I don't want to call it your argument, but your presentation about how important that is as a part of our development as human beings. It
right.
was really just wonderful. And that you presented it quite powerfully without standing on a soapbox.
There were a couple of them when you read them that brought me to tears, and I
Mhm.
thought what a weird thing it is that I wrote this, it was my experiences, and but hearing somebody else read it um made it feel, I don't know, so um vulnerable, I guess. And the eulogies for the pets, those of course are hard, but there were a couple other ones that you read where I got, and I'm trying to think of ones in particular that really struck me. The one, it's always because it's such a terrible unique experience that I had, but the one about the earthquake, the San Francisco earthquake, that was one where I got a shiver when you were reading it. Hearing that experience in somebody else's voice, it just brought back those moments.
I remember when you first told me about that.
Yeah,
You, sh- I can. It had something to do with one of the Peyton books, I think. But and that was a big, that was a big thing for me in recording this. Is that because each of the segments begins with the date,
yeah,
and there's a range of years, and I began to realize as I was reading the book and preparing, that you and I lived through a lot of these
yes,
together.
yes.
We knew each other. I knew you, and we talked, and we we shared a lot of these experiences together. And and you never told me you were writing this. You never mentioned it. It was just
Some of
something that
the places where I wrote, somebody gave me some advice. You were the one that gave me that advice. Yeah. And you mentioned that in your note. You added just a beautiful note to the end of it. And you mentioned that in the note that you felt like some of those reflected some conversations that we had had, and they absolutely did. The one about when Salem died, I don't know if you remember, you were here and you were doing a tarot reading in my living room, and he came and he got on the cards and you said, something about went to move him, and he said, "No, don't move him because he's like an ancient soul." And I never forgot that. That just stuck with me forever. And so those, yeah. So it is interesting. You can see like some of yourself, in these experiences that. So
It's yeah, that was I'm thank you for letting me do that. Let me add the the note from the narrator that's excuse me, only available in obviously the audiobook because I didn't narrate I didn't narrate the writing. But uh where was I going with this? Yeah, that was it was a it was it was a really special experience. Did you ever think we would record this? I mean, I remember you didn't tell me you were writing it. You didn't I remember going on Amazon or something to check.
Oh, because I guess there's a part of me that wondered if anybody would be interested in it. It was something I wanted to put out, but I wasn't sure whether it had an audience or it had any legs. Which is kind of where I wanted to ask you a question was, so you've recorded so many of my fiction works, right? And this is the first time you ventured into doing nonfiction for me. I know
Mhm.
you've done it for others. What is the difference? How does because some of those, I don't know, it requires a different skill set, or it requires a different approach than a fiction book does. So kind of what is that? How do you get kind of in that different mindset? I mean, this is something where you're almost me. Does that make any sense? Like you had to become almost me, and um
That's it exactly. It's there's a well for me, okay, right? Because there aren't any rules to narrating audiobooks, I mean, it's literally the Wild West on so many levels.
yeah,
And um uh but to for me, there is a responsibility, I mean, I'm speaking your truth, and not veiled, not veiled in Peyton's truth or Zion's truth or, Everly's truth. I mean, and it's, again, it has a lot to do with what I said in the note from the narrator. I think it's very brave to choose to say, this is what I think, this is how I feel. Like, shortest distance between 2 points, right? And so when I narrate what you think and what you feel without the veil of a character or a plot, there's a responsibility there to deliver it truthfully and honestly and without ornamentation, you know? And so and I think that's also why people read nonfiction is because there is no veil.
yeah.
It, it's the straight poop, and, and so there's a simplicity. I think there's a simplicity in the narration that is not necessarily required, in fiction. Um, there's, less ornamentation, but at the same time, I don't like going over the top, when I narrate fiction, but it's that thing, there's no and certainly there are characters and ramblings that required, uh, a difference in inflection and stuff like that. But just there's a simplicity and a directness that I think, I hoped for.
The one that struck me, and I was worried about how you're going to do it, is so I love recording, not I don't mean I record people, but I love bringing conversations to life, because I think
Mhm.
human conversation is so fascinating. And I love the interaction with people and how it can sometimes just go so off the rails and so awry. And there's a few of those where there's conversations. I had these adventures, repeated adventures, with getting medication for my cat with one of the big name pharmacies here in town. And they were always surreal. They were always surreal conversations. And then the fair is a boon for having these just bizarre conversations with people that are delightful in the sense that they're just so beyond the norm. And I wasn't sure how that was going, how you were going to be able to convey those because they're very much back and forth just between just dialogue. There's no other setup for it. And you did it. You managed to nail it. And those are some of my favorites in the book was those crazy conversations. And
Mine too. And that that's one of the places where, because you had written it, right? Me, pharmacist, me. I mean, you had written dialogue. Like if one has ever seen a play script before, that's, it names the character and there's a colon and then there's the dialogue. And I thought about that. There's another one, the last piece in the book that I had to actually stop and give some thought, to it, because okay, it's nonfiction. We don't really want characters.
yeah,
Yet you had created, I mean, you had basically, as usual, you had given me the template right there on the page that said, read this as a character. And so that's ultimately how it wound up. Um, the other one that I had to give a lot of thought about, and I had told you this, was the final piece where you take us on a wild ride of the idiosyncrasies of the English language.
yes, yes,
Yeah, that's very much about, words that are pronounced the same but that are spelled differently and have different meanings. And one to that's very difficult to convey orally, you
yeah.
know. And so, but to have, and the listening audience, you're just going to have to get the audiobook to see what we did. But you can't, at the same time, I couldn't spell out
No, that one was, yeah, that,
single word, or it would not have made any sense at all. So that was an interesting problem to solve. One of my other favorites was I voted.
oh, that's the one that got me teary-eyed. That's
Ah,
what I was thinking of. That one, yeah, because that was such a bad day. It was such a weird thing, and it was one of those days. You ever have those days where you're in the middle of it, and yet you have this sense that you're experiencing something more than yourself. You're experiencing something, a bigger thing, and voting has become such a fraught thing in this country. And that day I'd gone and it was not a good day. I was having a horrible day, and everything that felt like it was conspiring against me actually casting this damn vote. And there were so many times in the process of doing it that I thought, I'm just going to go home and forget it. I don't, I mean, unfortunately, living in California, you know, it's I think the urgency to vote sometimes doesn't feel as urgent no matter which side of the party you're on, because California is so unique and so overwhelmingly in one camp versus another. But I still feel voting is vitally important. And that day just culminated in seeing all these disparate people engaging in the same thing that I was trying to engage in. And I didn't realize until after I got home what I had seen. It was one of those moments where I sat down and I could calm down, and then I could see, I could think back on what I experienced that day and realize how incredible of an experience it was. As bad as that day was, as difficult as that day was, the way that that day played out was exactly as it should have, um, to make me realize how vitally important voting is, no matter what state you're in, no matter who you are.
yeah, that I couldn't agree more. And I couldn't agree more. And that was the other one, embracing failure. And what I loved about recording this was the humanity that, I mean, this is so human. You've written such a human thing, or you've certainly chosen to share your humanity, and remind us all, pick yourself up, dust yourself off,
And
and
the irony of that, the funny thing about that one is I actually succeeded because they actually selected me. And so I didn't know it at the time when I wrote that, I didn't know that they had selected me. And so I debated of whether going back and changing it. And then I thought, no, I'm going to leave it as it is because I think it's too important. But the irony was is that I actually did succeed.
Well, and that was, it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and I remember that
Yeah,
because we were either recording or either when you did it or you had just done it when we recorded Werewolves in London
yeah,
and Tank. You shared with me your different experiences of of actually standing on the stage at the Old Globe, and that was part of what I was channeling, for lack of a better word, when I you gave me the wonderful opportunity of getting to record the monologue from Macbeth that normally I would never get to say,
no,
but because I was narrating an audiobook that and playing this man in this situation
yeah,
that echoed your experiences from that workshop
yeah,
that you summarize in Embracing Failure.
yeah,
It I got to do that monologue, and it deepened that experience even more because of what you had been through
yeah.
in getting to that point. And just yeah, it's a wonderful book. So which makes me want to ask you, when can we expect volume 2?
So volume two is a piece of it's in work. I think I have about six uh anecdotes that I have gone into it. And it's kind of funny. It's the same. I had one in this one about Jack LaLanne dying, and um, probably a lot of people don't know who Jack LaLanne is, right? Because he was a San Francisco icon.
I have to tell you a Jack LaLanne story. Finish, and then I have a Jack LaLanne story. Good.
So I started ramblings too with the death of Diane Feinstein. It's in progress, and yeah, uh,
Wow.
yeah.
Good.
So
Good. How many years does Ramblings cover? Do you remember like what the earliest one was? The
yeah,
latest?
yeah, it's a lot. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I think it's over 10 years.
Um, Jack LaLanne, I can remember my mother in the living room.
You
This
know
so Jack, Jack LaLanne is the first one in Ramblings, right? So I'm opening the book and I'm reading it, and in my mind, I'm going, "Oh, this will be interesting to see. Will I connect to this the way I connect to?" Probably not unlike the other listeners, right? Will I connect to this the same way I've always connected to Michelle's fiction? And the first one is the Jack LaLanne story. I can remember. I mean, I can't envision it. It's cloudy, like you have the picture in your mind and the edges are fuzzy. But of my mom doing Jack LaLanne, she had the records because right, no CDs, no VHS, no DVD, no streaming.
Vinyl, vinyl.
Yeah, she had vinyl and she would do the exercises, and then he would appear on television like and live on
Yeah.
not Good Morning America but some facsimile
Yes.
of them,
Yes.
and she would work out with him. So dial it forward, god knows what, 50 years, and I'm teaching uh a credit bearing course for Caltech. It's aerobic dance. And part of what I instructed them in, because you don't just do a workout, you actually have to, there has to be a quantifiable way to grade them. It's Caltech, right?
Sure.
And it can't just be attendance, it can't just be whether they showed up. So I had to give them tests. And part of what we sort of discussed was the history of fitness. Jack LaLanne was a massive, massive, massive figure in the development of organized group exercise.
He
You know,
I guess
yeah,
he wasn't the first, but he had to be one of the earliest of getting
he originated the fitness club. What is now Bally's were a chain of Jack LaLanne fitness clubs, and which is like fun facts to know and tell, right? But
Homemakers, to work out with their kitchen chairs in the
it was the beginning of fitness as we know it. Yeah,
yeah,
of working out, right? Of taking class, of personal. Prior to that, it had been dance or sports.
right, right,
That you took a dance class if you were just Joe average, or you became a dancer, right? Or you were on a sports team at school, which we all know there
exercise.
were no there were no sports teams for girls.
No, no, this is before Todd Light, right? And so this is the first time probably that it was exercise for the average person.
Yeah.
To-
The idea of it, making that available, you
Yes,
know, and I mean, he also the flip side of it, right? Good exercise and good nutrition.
yes.
He approached it from that side as well in terms of juices and drinks and supplements and not selling them, but just recommending them.
Yeah, I can remember him making the juices. Remember seeing part of his show was there was part where he would make his juices. Yeah, I remember that very well.
So I knew first page, I knew I'm in. I'm all in. I'm all in. Both hands, both feet. So what's next?
So I'm finishing up Trading Time. It's an Everly and Isaac Christmas mystery. We missed, or I missed, was me, missed the Christmas deadline, but I don't think that matters. It's a good story, and it's going to be an interesting one. And then we'll get into Zion, because we're due for a new Zion, and then we'll get to Peyton, our next one in the new series in the hate crimes division. So.
That's exciting. And I think we've discussed or we've agreed we're going to, in terms of the land of audio, we're going to be releasing your two children's books in audio. Remind us of those titles.
Bailey Small but Fierce, and then Panda Bear, the Ghost Kid.
Oh, yeah.
And those in some ways are autobiographical because they are about real animals. So
and they'll be a part of our little experiment in the multiple option reading experience, or more, as we like to call it. You and I have always agreed that the role of audiobooks combined with reading, visually reading,
yes.
and beyond, have a real promise of being something special for helping people learn and make connection and vocabulary and conversation and imagination and creativity. So I'm excited that we have the Rue Cypress mystery, and I'm sure we'll be doing more of those. But that's exciting. And also we plan to knock out books 7 through 11 of the World of Samar. We were talking right before this, correct me if I'm wrong,
You are
that
right.
we hope to finish the World of Samar this calendar year.
Yeah.
So, and I'm super excited about that.
I think that's exciting. It's really exciting. So if you are one of our regular listeners, we've got a lot coming forward for you. So stay with us. And that has been Behind the Mic number 17. Thank you for hosting, Kelley.
It was so much fun.
All right. We will see you soon. And thank you again.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for Hamilton and Hazen Behind the Mic. Visit authormlhamilton.net and kellyhazennarrates.com to join our newsletters for more insider news and views. Today's episode is sponsored by Phoenix Publication Services. PPS, Digital Shepherds. Let us ignite your writing goals.